The creature from Jekyll Island has nothing to do with this story, nor does the Great Depression. This is about something much simpler than economics, something as American as apple pie, football, and baseball. Something that happens every year like clockwork and always brings joy to millions of people around the world. Every year, in October, my friends, we celebrate National Pumpkin Day. Yes, that's right. Every year, in October, we eat pumpkin pie. How did such a thing come to pass? Well, like so many other things that happen in this country, the origins of our beloved pumpkin pie are cloaked in mystery and legend. But worry not, dear viewer. I am here to uncover the truth behind this time-honored tradition. Our story begins, innocently enough, in a small town in New England. There once was a poor farmer who worked hard, but barely managed to get by. The farmer lived on a small farm in a small town in New England. His cows gave very little milk. His chickens rarely laid eggs. His pigs grew too small and too slow to ever be worth slaughtering. And his crops, well, let's just say, he should have stuck to eating beans instead of trying to grow fancy vegetables. In fact, the only decent thing he raised on his farm was an ample supply of pumpkins. Year after year, these pumpkins would grow bigger and rounder than those grown by any of his neighbors. So great were his pumpkins that even during the leanest of years, he knew he could survive on their plentiful stores of nutrition. The farmer also had something else in common with his neighbors, though. And that was a love of fresh duck dinners. Oh, how he loved a good roast duck. However, he shared that love with a large population of wild ducks, who made their home on a small pond in his pasture. Try as he might, the farmer could never catch one. No matter how early in the morning he approached the pond, or how carefully he constructed a blind, or what kind of duck call he tried, somehow those crafty birds sensed the danger and managed to be out of range. So the farmer went hungry season after season. Of course, when fall arrived, the ducks headed south, and the farmer's craving for a duck dinner only intensified. As Thanksgiving approached, the farmer pondered his predicament. He needed meat, but how could he get some? Then he got an idea. Early in the spring, he started scattering corn along the edge of the pond. The ducks liked the corn, and, since it was always there, they soon gave up dipping and foraging for food of their own. After a while, they became used to the farmer and began to trust him. They could see he was their benefactor, and they now walked close to him with no sense of fear. The farmer had his first taste of victory. Every day he would approach the pond, expecting to see those ducks swimming merrily around. Every day they were there, swimming closer and closer to shore, growing fatter and more docile. Spring turned into summer, and the farmer had his best duck shooting season ever. He was truly living the American dream. But this is where our tale takes a dark turn. As the season wore on, the ducks grew less inclined to travel. They were very comfortable near the pond, and it was an excellent source of food. Furthermore, the farmer kept the place well stocked, so the ducks didn't bother flying anywhere. Eventually, the ducks could not have flown even if they wanted to. They were simply too fat. Fall came, and the ducks stayed. Winter came, and the pond froze. But the ducks stayed. For their part, the ducks didn't mind at all. They didn't have to fly. They had plenty to eat. And the farmer was especially happy, because each week, all winter long, he had a delicious duck dinner. He built a shelter to keep them warm and fed them corn and berries throughout the long, cold months. Then came the night when the ice broke on the pond. The ducks waddled out onto the grass, blinking in the bright sunlight. They looked at the wide-open sky for the first time in months. Some of them honked nervously. They wanted to fly south, but the instincts which had guided their ancestors for generations were gone. They had forgotten the way. Those who had survived the winter were old and weak and too slow to navigate the long journey. They had grown soft. Their wings were thin and useless. No longer did they need to fly. Their flightless bodies, the products of artificial domestication, rendered them helpless. This is a sad tale, and I admit it may not be what you were hoping for on this, our annual celebration of Pumpkin Day. And yet, my friends, the farmer and his ducks teach us a valuable lesson about life. Sometimes it is good to be comfortable. Sometimes it is good to have plenty to eat and a safe place to live. Sometimes it is better to have a full belly than an empty nest. And sometimes, if you are a fan of delicious duck dinners, it is better to eat your pumpkin pie in July than wait for Thanksgiving. And speaking of delicious dinners, we here at Mises University want to help you prepare for yours. After all, economics is the study of scarcity, and you probably already know that pumpkins and duck are both delicious. So the problem must be choosing between them, weighing costs and benefits, opportunity and risk. What do you value most? We can help you decide. With that said, we now return you to our regularly scheduled program. In addition to being rich and powerful, the men who met on Jekyll Island were highly influential through their roles in government and business. They controlled or affected most of the major banks and corporations in the nation. A prime example of such a man was Nelson Aldrich, a senator from Rhode Island and chairman of the Senate Banking and Currency Committee. Aldrich was a leader in the movement to restore the gold standard and author of the Gold Reserve Act of 1908. That law provided for the reconvertibility of paper currency into gold. It was the last measure passed before passage of the Federal Reserve Act. At the time, the act was being planned. Aldrich was also chairman of the National Monetary Commission. This was a congressional committee appointed to study and report on the nation's monetary system. Aldrich was one of 5 men who went to Jekyll Island. Another director of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York was Charles D. Norton. Like Aldrich, he also served on the Senate committee, studying a new banking system. Still another Jekyll Island attendee, who held dual roles, was Benjamin Strong, who served on the board of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and was a member of the House Banking and Currency Committee. Strong was the son-in-law of Charles A. Dana, publisher of the influential New York Sun. The connection between banking and the press was about to become even stronger. On December 26, 1910, less than 3 weeks before the Jekyll Island Conference ended, Senator Aldrich sent for Frank A. Vanderlip, president of National City Bank and a former New York State treasurer. Vanderlip was the only non-banker invited to attend the meeting. During their conversation, Vanderlip listened as Aldrich explained the plan for the new Central Reserve Association, a system designed to replace the National Monetary Commission, whose term had nearly expired. This new organization would eventually be called the Federal Reserve Association. According to Vanderlip's account of the conversation, Aldrich was most anxious to prevent the plan from getting into the hands of politicians who he believed would muck it up, so Vanderlip was sworn to secrecy. Aldrich then sent for Thomas S. Gates, editor-in-chief of the New York Times, whom he also sworn to secrecy. Finally, Henry P. Davison of Kuhn, Loeb & Co. was summoned to complete the circle of secrecy. The bankers would control the association, and the editors would control the press. This was how the conspiracy developed. When the Federal Reserve Act was submitted to Congress, many of its most important features were written in vague language. Some details were omitted entirely. That was a tactical move to avoid debate over fine points and to allow flexibility for future interpretation. The goal was to get the bill passed and perfected later. Since then, the act has been amended 195 times, expanding the power and scope of the system to the point where, today, it would be almost unrecognizable to the congressmen and senators who voted for it in 1913. We have done a lot of damage to the free market in this episode, but we have saved the best for last. Stay tuned for the part 2 of the Great Duck Dinner. Thanks for watching.